Hi everyone, welcome back to the Let's Reset Power Up sessions. Wonderful to have you with us again today. We're going to go from football to uncertainty. And you know, we saw a lot of uncertainty in the football, but actually we have two experts. I'm going to let you introduce yourselves. But we were talking on our podcast. We have a podcast called Reset a couple of weeks ago. And if any of you haven't done an exercise with a pen, listen to the podcast and you'll hear these guys talking about how you can be more focused and brilliant with a pen. But I'm going to leave you in the very capable hands. Thank you very much. Enjoy your session.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much indeed. Hello, and how are you?
Well, thanks.
Marvellous. Good. Thanks. We're here to talk about uncertainty, but not the usual aspects of uncertainty that we've heard so much about over the last 2 years. In fact, a meta-analysis of the word uncertainty across the internet shows that 97% of the time we use the word, we paraphrase it amongst negative terminology. We are going to talk about the pink, bright and beautiful aspects of uncertainty and where the positive places it can lead us are. So would anybody be so kind as to share the uncertainty that is in their lives right now, just so that we can land some techniques that are useful to you? Is anybody facing uncertainty? Yes, please.
Should I move further out of London than I already am?
Should I move out of London? It's a question many of us have questioned. Anybody else? Yes?
Do I pay the builders the unfair price they're asking?
Do I pay the builders the unfair price? It's a good question that I'm going to be asking tomorrow. Anybody else? Yes, please.
Planning a wedding in a country that's bankrupt.
Planning a wedding in a country that's bankrupt. Crikey.
That is a tough
Micro
one.
and macroeconomics all in one go. I mean, no one mentioned the global meltdown of economics or the climate, which is good. It's good. It's got a handle on that. But what we can see from that is that uncertainty is deeply subjective. And what we're going to talk about today will matter to the Monday morning anxieties of facing the week ahead of you, to the difficult meeting and the conflicts that we have to have, and the meltdown that's ahead of us all. Because uncertainty is literally everywhere.
It really is. It has been named in science the fundamental fear, the fear that rules them all. Because your brain is trying to keep you safe at any time of day or night. And to do that, it needs to know what's going on. Your brain is trapped behind your skull. It has no idea what's real or not. It relies on information from the world around you. And when information is lacking on any level of consciousness, it literally freaks out.
There are numerous studies around this that Catherine has shown me in my education into the science of uncertainty, but this metaphor kind of sums them up. We've been talking a lot about anxiety, about diversity, about equality, about fatigue, about exhaustion. We've felt many of those over the last 2 years, and if you want to find one thing that joins them all, it's uncertainty. Now that makes uncertainty pretty scary and large as a topic, but it also makes it into a solution, because it is a way to combat and overcome every single one of those. There is one thought that we'd like you to take away from everything that we're going to show you as fast as we can today, and it is this: uncertainty makes a hard day harder. There is no doubt about the weather forecast for the next few years. It is going to be tough. Everybody knows it. There will be rain, there will be storms, economic, wedding-based, and builders included. However, there is a technique, a trait, and it is called uncertainty tolerance. And everywhere that you've said resilience or well-being for the last 2 years, and it has been essential, I would like you to update your minds to uncertainty tolerance being the thing that you need, because that rain will come, as will the wind, and the thing that will enable you to dance and sing your way through it will be uncertainty tolerance. That's the metaphor. I'll hand back to Catherine for the science of uncertainty tolerance.
So uncertainty tolerance is more than just a catchphrase. It's a psychological scale that we can both measure, and it's also changeable. It's not a fixed trait. It's something that, depending on what happens in your life, changes up and down. And the interesting thing about it is that in uncertainty can be the key driver of anxiety, but it is also in uncertainty that our brains can be more plastic, more pliable, more adaptable than in any other moment. So what's going on? And it's all down to your uncertainty tolerance, because what we found is those people with low uncertainty tolerance, they suddenly make poor decisions. They have self-doubt, they're indecisive, they get physically fatigued, they're impressionable to extremist views, and have high anxiety. Uncertainty, when you have low uncertainty tolerance, affects us both cognitively and emotionally as well. However, there are people, and we can all be one of these people, who has high uncertainty tolerance. And when you have high uncertainty tolerance, which we can measure in a very extended scientific 82 7-dimension scale, you also correlate high on ability to collaborate, especially with people unlike yourself. You also have greater empathy, you make better decisions, you have more emotional resilience, you're also more open-minded. So it improves your life personally, emotionally, personally, but also in terms of innovation and creativity. Now, what we found, and we've been studying this, I'm affiliated with UCL and Goldsmiths, in fact, we were doing the uncertainty tolerance test on up to 10,000 people over the last 2 years. And what we found in this time, which has scientifically been described in the uncertainty index as scientifically the most uncertain time in all of history because of how super connected we are, how big our worlds are. What we found out of the 10,000 people was that over 65% only had medium to low uncertainty tolerance, which at a point in time where we need to not just like pivot the ship, but actually like chart a new map is incredibly worrying. But it's okay because, like I said, we can all change.
And this becomes fundamental to our industry and the world in which we live. To our audiences, a survey was taken of 50,000 people with low tolerance to uncertainty. Their exact location could be predicted with 97% accuracy. It's been studied in meetings. A meeting room with low tolerance to uncertainty will default to the most senior and whitest male in the room. But as Catherine's explained, uncertainty drives creativity, innovation and problem solving as well. So, as we look ahead to the real brief that's in front of us, we don't need a World Uncertainty Index to tell us how uncertain things are. But one prediction that I like is the FT just last month that suggests the easy part is over. Fucking hell. Which then means that we have to look at the tools that we have for uncertainty. And if you're in the world that we are, our industry, we typically use risk management or reforecasting to assess uncertainty. And that's a mistake because risk management and reforecasting are based on known variables. They're based on mathematics and probabilities. So what they don't allow us to do is to examine the impossible, the unpredictable, the unplausible, which is really where creativity sits and lies. Or we've relied on resilience, which is no doubt an essential trait and a skill, but ultimately resilience is just getting good at taking the blows, right? And if the blows are going to keep coming, then how do we get faster and smarter and better as a result of those blows? Also, I worry about resilience because it tends to put the responsibility for the organisation onto the individual, and that's not going to get us where we need to get to either. You can talk to management consultants if that's your thing, and they have a number of really bad acronyms because they don't work in marketing. Chief amongst those, when you're talking about uncertainty, would be the VUCA framework. I'm sure you've heard of it. And it just really illustrates why a spreadsheet won't get you through uncertainty, because uncertainty is unique amongst those things because it's something that we feel.
And we feel it deeply, we feel it in our body. This is literally an actual picture of me on the inside most of the time. I wear black to try and pretend that I'm cool, but I am in a glass cage of emotion. We all are, because we are faced with daily uncertainty and our brain doesn't like it because set on a default, it has a default very prehistoric safety mechanism which sounds a huge alarm when uncertainty arises. How can it keep you safe? And if you let that automatic system just carry on, you get this. You're writhing around physically filled with these emotions, and that distorts your thinking, it distorts your behavior, and it limits your ability to be innovative and creative.
So because uncertainty works on a subconscious level, the intervention that we've created, the experiment over the last year, also has to work on that level. So a quick experiment for you to kind of determine where you are and to identify how much on autopilot we always are. Please, can you take your index finger, your trigger finger, your nose-picking finger, that one, and can you draw a Q, a capital Q, on your forehead, a circle on your forehead here, a circle with a tail. Please draw a Q on your forehead. And now, can you just recognise and remember whether you drew the tail of that Q towards your right eye or to your left eye? Those of you to your left eye, could you raise your hands? These people are the better liars amongst you. Because you saw the Q as the world sees you. You didn't see it as you look at the Q. And if you quote the Q to your right eye, that means you saw the Q and you see yourself in the world and you project against that world. You might have a stronger opinion of yourself, but perhaps less empathy. I thought it would be more left eyes in a marketing audience. That's where I stand. Talking of a marketing audience, that has been my life. I've run agencies for 20 years. This was my last, and it was the last day of me being in an agency. And you can see my little fluffy head at the back as the new team were pushing me off the stage. As we won the Beamers that night, and something began to happen to me. I entered into a stage of peak uncertainty in my life. This had been my identity for a long time. I left as I was also leaving another massive relationship as my life. I was going into divorce with 2 small children. It was nothing less than a tragedy. My new career was writing a book, which everybody told me didn't make any money. So the uncertainty was peak. I mean, maybe it was just peak midlife crisis, but nonetheless, it was all very peak. And then, just as I began to make a career out of this new world of writing books and traveling the world and speaking to people, the business model of traveling the world and speaking to people fell apart. And so did I, very nearly. Because all of a sudden I had these 2 chances. The pseudo-science and the pseudo-strategy, unable to find the confidence to tell me that they didn't know what to do, when that was the only truth of the last 2 years. We didn't know what to do. And in that space of doubt and indecision often lies the pathway to better ideas and better thinking. And yet there wasn't even the confidence to suggest amongst this tragedy there could well be positive opportunity. And that frustrated the hell out of me, because by the end of that year I was applying for insolvency and for jobs, which I have not had to do in my life. So I needed a way out. And the classic model of leadership wasn't providing me with any answers to the uncertainty we faced. So I went to find a new set of leaders whose experience and uncertainty I thought could be replicable to others who were struggling as much as I was. This was the first of our uncertainty experts. This is Carl Loco. Carl Loco grew up on the streets of South London. He was tipped for Oxbridge. He's a hugely articulate, intelligent young man, but the tragedy and the trauma of those streets caught up with him, and just before his exams, his best friend was murdered, died in his arms, and emotionally, traumatically failed his exams. The streets picked him up. Those gangs also saw his talents. So he was running with those gangs, and very soon after he was running those gangs, named as London's #1 gang leader. But it didn't take long for his intelligence and emotional aptitude to get him out of that situation, to begin running programs that would get other young people out of that situation. And soon his social enterprise and community endeavours were recognised by everyone from Richard Branson to Prince Harry. And now Carl Loco runs a multi-million-pound investment fund to other young black entrepreneurs in Brixton. He is truly the example of an uncertainty expert, because they learned the arts of uncertainty in the shadows, for sure. But then they went on to become leading lights in society, demonstrating that they've manifested it amongst two schools of uncertainty. And that's where we believe they have something to teach us. So to give you an example, here's Carl, for 60 seconds or so, explaining the benefits of uncertainty.
So for me, uncertainty is, and also it's the only place where you become more pliable and things are more pliable. When you're certain, you kind of know the formation, you know the pattern, you can just kind of work in a unconscious way. But there is something about uncertainty that stimulates your consciousness. So for me, it's like uncertainty, yes, is uncomfortable, but that discomfort is generating within you a heightened awareness, allowing you to see what you couldn't previously see, acknowledge what you wouldn't previously acknowledge, and that means that you can create what you couldn't previously create, because now you know more, so you can do more. You see more, so you can be more.
Uncomfortable, yes, but by experiencing it, you can do more, see more, and be more. This is the kind of leadership that I was looking for, but I didn't want it just to be inspiration. I've worked in marketing long enough to know that dealing in future truths will only get you so far. What I wanted was some substance, and what I wanted was some science, and that's where I met Catherine.
Yes, so that's a terrible photo of me. I look like bewildered Angelica Houston, but this is me. I was working away at UCL with the Brain Science Lab on anxiety. I am a collective of anxieties when Sam called me up. Now, I also run a female-led neuroscience studio, and I had a vow that year to not work with any white men. But he said, look, anxiety, you can do all the Shinrin-yoku and breathwork that you like. There's something underneath it that's driving this. It's uncertainty. And I have met these people who have these superpowers against it. And I thought, what if we can break down what is happening in these people's heads? And then we can use neuroscience to create a skill set, a toolkit. We can teach it to everybody, and we can save the world.
So, with this newfound scientific backbone to my life, I began to explore some rigor. I had this definition of an uncertainty expert. They'd learned their art in the shadows, they'd applied it to the mainstream, and I started to write it up. Just on my Medium account, the first few interviews I'd done, which had all been guys from the criminal justice system. The piece went viral for anything that I'd written, and I had people around the world asking for this new paradigm in leadership. So I wrote up a kind of online workshop, but the world didn't need another fucking Zoom call at that stage. So I made it a bit more interactive, used some QR code technology, mashed it together, started doing video interviews, and I started getting feedback from people saying this was the best documentary they'd ever seen. Documentary? I thought it's not a documentary, it's a Zoom call, but nonetheless. And it began to inspire me into a different direction. Then with Catherine on board, we began asking a series of questions, right? Because we know what the uncertainty of the time felt like. The conversation was, how do we get better at working collaboratively on video calls, right? That wasn't what we were really feeling or going through. So we started asking this question, what is the real negative human emotional impact of uncertainty on your life? We asked it to over 3,500 people, and every single one of those hundreds of different words that we received could be put into 3 camps, and I know you'll recognize them. The negative impact of uncertainty on us as human beings emotionally is fear, number 1. And actually the 2 most commonly cited things were fear of things changing and fear of things not changing. But you can put all the panic and anxiety into that category too. Fog, indecision, confusion, what the fuck? And then stasis, listlessness, meh, Broadly speaking, that's where we all were. So we began to use the science that Catherine was informing me and the stories that we began to uncover to take people on a journey through those 3 stages. And we're going to try and headline them to you, which will just be a brief insight into the bigger intervention that we're currently running, which is, we understand, the world's largest
experiment in uncertainty, the largest research body globally in uncertainty ever.
So to tackle fear needs to be addressed first, because without being able to emotionally regulate that response, that glass emotional cage, you can't step into the positive attributes of uncertainty tolerance, the creativity and the collaboration it can give. So here we introduce the first of our uncertainty experts in the series, Morgan Godwin, who is a masterclass on overcoming the fear of uncertainty. Morgan had a very recognisable upbringing, but a tragedy took place in her family, which meant Morgan had to go into full-time work. Through full-time work, she lost her job, and low-level anxiety turned into full-scale depression, and recreational drug use got more seriously. And then through a terrible accident, Morgan was arrested for the accidental overdose of her very best friend. Sentenced to 20 years in prison, Morgan was able to regulate the emotional upheaval of all of this, teach herself languages and law, and upon release, she led a team who have created a breakthrough, landmark human rights victory in the opioid crisis in the States, changing laws and saving lives along the way. So I got the chance to speak to Morgan and explicitly interview on how she managed to overcome and regulate that fear to turn it into something manageable and then useful.
Yes, so radical gratitude is a very active strategy. It's not just sort of going throughout your day and having these sort of offhand thoughts, oh, I'm grateful for this or that. It's really sitting down and thinking and digging deep, what am I grateful for? And get to the core of it. I mean, I was so grateful for my warm blankets in jail. And I remember that now, because do my blankets ever make it on my gratitude list today? No, they don't. And why is that? Because it's exhausting to force gratitude for these things we take for granted. And so I really have to rewind, zoom out, and think, I am grateful for these blankets that keep me warm. I am grateful for clean drinking water. And no, it is exhausting to have radical gratitude because it is an active strategy. It is not passive. You do have to sort of cultivate it and channel your mental energy, get out of the pity party, the wallowing thing, and think, stop it. It is so much easier to be miserable. Something I learned in prison is that the right choice is almost always the harder choice.
Because it's fighting your fear, which wants you to do the safe thing. When uncertainty hits, your sympathetic nervous system activates, adrenaline floods your body, and it feels unsafe. And you want to get away, not from what's causing it, but the feeling in your body. We now know emotions live in the body. And so you will do anything. Now, what Morgan does is something really clever. She hacks her own system. By forcing her brain to feel gratitude, and the brain doesn't know what's real or not, it releases dopamine, a chemical that soothes her system so that rather than just reacting out of fear, she can take the time to respond in a more rational way. Now, of course, if you don't do that, you let that fear lead into a whole range of things, the most maladaptive being a shortcut to dopamine, safety behaviors.
So safety behaviours has changed my life and my understanding of my own relationship with uncertainty and fear. Unlike they sound, safety behaviours never make you safe. A shorthand I've been given for them is fake safe. So when you have that internal feeling, that discomfort of fear, and you begin to be able to identify it emotionally, you know one of these comes next. Now, with the thousands of people we've had through the process so far, we've asked everybody, can they identify their common and their sneakier safety behaviours in response to uncertainty? You probably get the gist of what these are. You might even be able to recognise them. From the list that we had, these were the top 5. Number 1, always alcohol. This has been a game changer for me. Being able to identify the difference between a bottle of wine that's a safety behaviour and a bottle of wine that's fun to drink is quite life-changing. Then sugar and snacks and all the things you'd imagine, then hiding about in our inboxes, then starting fights, and everybody's been one in those fights. Why the hell did this fight start? And it's because you were avoiding something else, all the way through to social media. So you get a sense, right? Back to the original point, the autopilot that is on anyway, driven by fear, and fear can't drive. So it becomes a choice, and it's by increasing uncertainty tolerance that all these drop away. So going to keep moving quickly. That's the first of the 3 stages of uncertainty, the second being fog, which will shut us down. The phrases are all confusion and indecision. So how does it lead to creativity and adaptability? Well, the second of our uncertainty experts in this area is Dr. Vivian Ming, an incredible woman who started life as a man, whose natural talents were not being fully realized. She fell into depression, he fell into homelessness, ended up living in a car with a gun in his glove box, counting the nights until he was going to take his own life. An intervention luckily was made. He made it into MIT. He invented the software that creates the animojis on your phones that was then taken on by the CIA, but that's another story. And then decided to face the greatest uncertainty, the transition of gender, which he admitted to his then fiancée just days ahead of their wedding. They delayed the wedding and were then finally wed as two women. And now Dr. Ming has found her place in the world and has just been named by the FT and Forbes as one of the leading scientists in the top 10 scientists in the world in the LGBT+ community. Dr. Ming's specialism is uncertainty. And I will hand back over to her to explain how we do decrease that aspect of fog and get better at exploring the unknown.
These are the skills that prepare us for the unknown. I mentioned this word before, meta-learning, learning to learn. If you asked me right now, the world is very uncertain. We're entering this decade of uncertainty. Please, Dr. Ming, what is the one skill my child should know when they grow up? And I bet the most common answers people would give is they should learn about AI, they should learn STEM skills, they should learn how to program. No, that's insane. How would anyone know what they should know in 10 years? The only person that could answer that question is them 10 years from now. So what do you need to give your child? The ability to explore the unknown. The ability to deal creatively with uncertainty. That is the predictor. And here's the thing, my contention is it always has been. For all of humanity's history, the predictor of life outcomes has been our ability to deal with the unknown. The rest of it is admittedly what we needed to build society and civilization, to run agriculture, everything else that the guy bitches about in Sapiens. We did need a certain collective action to reach there, but we don't need that anymore. Or at least we increasingly will not, as the routine work is done by machines. Your value add is you, and it always has been.
It really has. And our ability to lean into the unknown in science is our ability to lean into cognitive dissonance, because our brains are prediction machines. Anil Seth's work on this, Being You, is incredible. You're permanently making predictions, and you're doing that on models that you create of the world. Now, those models are limited by your own experience. In a changing world, they constantly need updating. But when things feel wrong and that dissonance occur, you shut down if you're on autopilot. You seek people more like you, not less like you. You go back to old answers, not look forward, and you let into your biases. If you can't open up and get used to this feeling, you let into your biases, and the worst one being negativity bias. And I can tell you that of the sort of 11,000 thoughts that you have every day, 85% will be negative, and of those, 95% of them will be the same as yesterday, and of your worries, between 1 to 3% will ever come true, and most people, 0 will. So beware the biases, lean into uncertainty, and open up, because it's only then that you can get through to moving out of stasis.
So in this intervention, stasis came up as the hardest thing for people to move through in response to the uncertainty that happened around them. So we were looking for real specialists from our uncertainty experts, and chief amongst those is Rez Ghadi. Rez was born into a refugee camp in Pakistan. She's then gone on since then to become a Harvard-graduated human rights lawyer. The NGO that she's created that helps young women going through refugees into education is phenomenal. I spoke to her from her HQ in Erbil in Iraq to describe how she manages to break through the stasis of uncertainty.
From a very young age, I learnt how to use my gut instinct. I didn't know what it was, but I felt like there was something more than just what my brain was telling me in any particular situation. From a very short sitting with someone, I felt that I could usually gather a little bit about their intentions and whether the situation felt right or not right. In that instinct, I know that something doesn't feel right or does feel right. You're just picking up a sense, and you have not yet had the ability to register exactly what it is or what the risks were or what it is that you are feeling. But I always find that that gut instinct really guides me, and later on I sit down and I think about it. Why did I feel this way? What was I seeing? What did I sense? And then use my intellectual abilities to break down what that feeling was. But I mean, I am very much a believer of both using your body and mind in your thinking and approach to situations. And
That's exactly it. Thank you, Ez. Using your body and your mind. And it's only just about now in neuroscience that we know that they are interlinked. We call it embodied cognition. The day of the mind and the body being separate is over. Emotions live in the body and we need them to make good decisions. We now know the best decision makings are made with our gut instinct fine-tuned. That's called embodied cognition. The signals that we often ignore because we disconnect from our body. The Harvard Business Review, in fact, just labeled gut instincts as the key decision-making skill of the future. But we're just not used to doing it. As Rez said, she has fine-tuned her gut instinct by going back over events to know whether she was right or wrong. It is a tool. Your mind and your body are tools that we don't ever use because we're stuck on autopilot. Now, we don't have time to go into this, but there's something called interoception. Just remember that word. Spell check doesn't know it, but we are now finding out that it is the cornerstone of not just well-being, but also our ability to make good decisions in uncertainty. It's the ability to feel sensations in our body and know what they're related to.
These tools changed my life. I was being honest about the uncertainty that I was falling into, and the world around me felt like it was falling away. I'd done most of the interviews. I knew that I had something useful, but I was running out of time. I was running out of money. But I had Catherine, the science. I now had an entire department at UCL, get this, the Decision-Making and Uncertainty Laboratory. What a niche. And they were backing up the work that we'd done. They began to produce a scientific assessment around it of uncertainty tolerance bespoke to the work that we were doing. I had about 6 weeks of money left, so we decided to take a risk, to take on everything that we'd learned. And I launched The Uncertainty Experts, the world's first interactive documentary scientifically proven to increase your tolerance to uncertainty. It wasn't actually scientifically proven at that stage, but like I say, with a background in marketing, I was very clear on the future truths that I wanted it to become. With 6 weeks to go, we produced the world's first interactive documentary. We put 500 tickets on sale, and we sold out a week before the show. And we produced something remarkable, taking on board all of those stories, taking people through this journey of fear, fog, and stasis. And what I didn't know was how much of it I was writing for me, to get through that experience that I was going through. And there isn't a day when I haven't taken these on board, particularly that last one. The idea of embodied cognition, this radical thought that we do have two brains, or at least two decision-making centers. My brain has always just been driven around by my body. The idea that I might trust both equally, and this is what the science tells us, to me was remarkable. And the evidence really was there.
And it really was there. As I taught Sam, it's incredibly hard to have an experiment in which you get statistically significant results. People do their whole PhDs and never get there. And Sam walked in and we constructed an incredibly robust experiment with UCL Brain Science Department to test the interactive documentary, or intervention as we like to call it in science, to see before and after if their tolerance, their uncertainty tolerance changed. And it did. It did to such a significant result that we're now in the process of writing up the second paper to be published on it. And if you'd like to see the first one, which is under review at the moment, if you write to hello@uncertaintyexperts.com, you will get a bounce back that will give you a link to the paper. But Sam did it. Everybody did it. They scientifically proved that everybody could increase their tolerance and unlock all this potential.
And one of the things that we learn around uncertainties is absolutely fundamental to imposter syndrome. I've suffered with imposter syndrome my whole life, never more so than around academics. And as the lead writer on this, Dr. Avery Bilovich said to me, he said, "You'll be the first person I've written a paper with that doesn't have a PhD." I was like, mate, I haven't even got a degree. So the pride I feel at achieving this and it being up for review is remarkable. And you can read it, access it all. There's some interesting things there. But it boils down to this. The truth is that that experience of uncertainty that we try to navigate with risk management tools and better aspects of hybrid working, right, is not connecting to the true human experience of uncertainty. And that's necessary. If we're going to talk about equality, if you're going to talk about diversity, if we're going to talk about anxiety, right, the bigger aspect issues, unless we know what connects them all, you're not going to get to a solution. But when you do get to a place where you connect them all, we can turn this around. And I was getting all the briefs from all the clients who wanted to get people to a sense of bravery and clarity and progress, right? Of course, we understand that, but you can't move from one opposite to the other without breaking people. I've seen that too. But what we did see was that those traits do move. And fear was shown again and again to move to a place of positive action and momentum. It can be harnessed and it can be healthy. And out of that fog, not necessarily can we arrive at clarity too immediately, but we do arrive at a place of creativity, agility, and greater adaptivity, because that fog gives us a sense of air cover. And lastly, the way out of trust wasn't what I thought, the way out of stasis wasn't what I thought it was going to be. It was about connection. Connection to ourselves, connection to one another, connection to why we do what we do. And that was what broke people out of stasis again and again. And this is nearly 10,000 data sets. And the question that we often get to presuppose you is, does this work at work or does this work at home? As we said at the beginning, the things that we took for the examples of uncertainty in everyone's lives, right, surprise me. I wrote this as a professional thing. It ends up being a deeply personal thing. But most of the responses we get, and every day we get responses, talk about the uncertainties of our whole lives. And where does this leave us? Well, rather excitingly, that pilot I told you about, the last 3 tickets went to 3 Netflix execs. So we are now in a stage of beginning to process how this whole experiment and intervention can play out on a stage to millions. So we leave you with a gift. This QR code will take you to a free test of your own uncertainty tolerance. It takes about 2 or 3 minutes, and it will give you a number and a quartile. So immediately you can begin to place yourself, which means that this malleable trait of uncertainty begins to be something that you can take, and you can train, and you can adapt to becoming an uncertainty expert too.
So if you take one thing away with you today, that word, uncertainty tolerance, because remember, uncertainty can lead to breakdown, but also it can be a technology for possibility. Rather than be afraid of it, you should be excited by this time, because the brain doesn't know the difference between fear and excitement. It is the same feeling. The only difference is what you think is going to happen next.
Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Sam. Brilliant. You know, we talked about the 7 needs of well-being and performance, and uncertainty is the first need. So thank you for giving us some great insight, top tips, and brainy stuff. And do you know the number of people we've had on the stage today who haven't got a degree? I think you're the 4th one so far.
Well, Catherine's much more than brainy stuff in terms of degrees. First in her year and the only person I've ever met with 3 masters. So
I've got enough for everyone, it's okay.
So you've got enough for everyone. Thanks very much. Guys, don't go away for long, because the next one is all around the power of how are you, with one of our mental health experts, David Beanie. It's a little glimpse into a workshop that we've done for over 1,000 people at 2E, across Google globally. So just go and grab a quick cup of coffee and come straight back, and we'll see you in a moment. Thanks very much. Thanks, guys.